game, the dust has settled, and we have the final standings for the European LCS Spring split. As we know it, SK, Fnatic, and H2K are on 1, 2, and 3, and then Gambit, the Unicorns of Love, and the Copenhagen Wolves have made that playoff spot. Elements can be happy with their season. They are in number 7. That means that's a safe spot, but not what they had hoped for. And then we have Roccat and Giants off to the promotion tournament, and MYM was auto-relegated and will be replaced by a challenger team. Stress, I think you have a clear guess on what that challenger team might be.
It's a clear guess, but there's always room. There's never say never. Origin are the strong favorites going into the playoffs, but you know, Lowland Lions, Gamers 2, they've looked pretty sharp themselves.
Before we take a look at the playoff bracket, I'd like to know from all of you, it has been quite the crazy season here in Europe, as it always is. What has been the most standout thing, Trevor?
I think the most standout thing is the fact that no matter which team you look at, number 1 and number 10, they can all still take games. Yes, the frequency is significantly lower, but Copenhagen Wolves, you would have expected to be the clear favorites against Giants as a whole. And all of a sudden, Giants upset them in the 9th hour with everything on the line. Elements, 7 and 11, what was it on the split, play 7th. They take down H2K when H2K was outperforming absolutely everybody. So you've got this topsy-turvy mentality. The thing is, it's also best of one. So the biggest takeaway for me is watching these teams in BO1s, and then we want to contrast them to BO5s, where real depth and real on-the-fly adjustment intelligence shines through.
I think standout for me will be Fnatic. Coming into the split, I was like, hey, they picked up 2 Koreans. They got February, and we knew he was good, but he's never really played in the LCS. Steelback, we didn't really know too much about. And yet they managed to become the 2nd best team in Europe if you look at the standings. And I feel the way they've been performing the last few weeks, probably the best team in Europe. I love the way they play. I love how they adapt to new patches. And I love the way they have carries in so many roles, because Huni is really a top laner who goes in and win games for your team. So I think Fnatic has been the standout team and the big surprise. And I always love watching them play.
And I also just want to quickly jump in on that. There was an interview that Yellowstar did a couple of weeks ago, where he was talking about the acquisition of the 2 Korean players. And he was saying he met Rainover during Worlds, talking to Rainover then led him to finding Huni, and then as a team and as an organization, they brought both of them over. So this Yellowstar, the captain, having to rebuild an entire team with this great gold mine discovery.
Yeah, I echo the Fnatic sentiments as well. And not just from a playing standpoint, but from a personality standpoint. I think it's fair to say that Huni Mania has been running wild over the European LCS. And to see a player integrate themselves so well with the fans, everything about Fnatic's team has been pretty surprising, but all in a positive way.
Let's also step back and look at the teams that have actually really shone through. Unicorns, a lot of people wrote them off before the Spring Split began. Gambit, let's be honest, we didn't expect them to place 4th. H2K came out of nowhere. So you got these middle-of-the-table teams that you would not have expected. It was going to be Roccat. It was going to be Elements. You know, those were the teams that were meant to be there, and they're not.
But the funny thing is, some of the teams you mention is also where you have to look at the coaches, which is a new addition to the LCS. Yeah. And I feel like we have seen a very clear difference between certain coaches and how some of them work. Leviathan, obviously, with Gambit coming in after they had a terrible start, did really well. And then we always talk about Prolly for H2K. It's been working so well for these teams and the new coaches.
Yeah, it has. And as you said, those new teams and the new teams stepping up we might not have expected. A couple of those are in the playoffs, so let's pull up that playoff bracket and take a look at who's facing off versus who. Of course, Gambit versus the Unicorns of Love. We saw a preview of it just yesterday, but I'm not going to say it's going to be a completely representative. Trevor, how do you think they're going into that game?
I have no idea. Like, that is a team. These are 2 teams that have been up and down. We looked at that graph yesterday during the matchup of performances and ranks over the weeks, and they either hit a home run or they flounder and get like knocked out instantly. So I think Gambit are probably more stable, but Unicorns have a bigger opportunity to surprise.
I think these 2 teams, when you look at it in a best of 5, anything could happen. I mean, what do you pick and ban? These are 2 teams that Gambit used to be known for innovation. Unicorns are the team that right now are innovating. Best of 5 is going to be crazy.
Yep. And then the other game we see there, H2K versus the Copenhagen Wolves. The Fisho, you believe in the Wolves, I do believe. But H2K today, to say the best performance we've seen in their last 4 games, because they've had fallen off a little bit.
I mean, in my heart, I will always believe the Copenhagen Wolves are going to win, because they're after all the greatest team out there. But H2K will be the big favorites coming in. It is a best out of 5 again, as we said, so it's very different. And if H2K is going to struggle on that patch, like we have seen them do here on 5.5, that can be a big problem for them. If they don't adapt in the best out of 5 and you start banning them out, that's where I feel like Copenhagen Wolves might have bigger champion pools, but we're going to have to see once they go into the games.
Yeah, and two things really quickly. I did predict the Copenhagen Wolves to take that 6th spot.
You
are fantastic.
It wasn't quite the way I had hoped, to be fair. But the bigger thing for me, I'm not sure if I'm on the H2K hype train anymore. I really was, up until last week, probably the biggest believer.
Can confirm.
And all of a sudden, these last 2 weeks, the latest patch, it's now throwing these spanners in the loop. This is the team that was doing so well from 5-2, 5-3, 5-4, 5-5 hits, and then all of a sudden, they just hit the brakes. So I want to see in the best of 5s, but it's this outlier case. Can they still beat an SK and a Fnatic if and when they make it there?
Yeah. Are we seeing any other final but SK Fnatic?
I think H2K could do it. I think they could. I think a Unicorns or Gambit are more likely to be beaten than an H2K against SK and Fnatic.
That's true, but I would say my favorite for going into the final is going to be Fnatic. I think SK Gaming can be exploited in a best out of 5, but it requires you to have good enough players.
So you're saying yes.
To obviously beat them.
See, the thing is,
my guess is it's going to be SK Fnatic in the final.
Hang on.
But I think Fnatic will have the edge.
Dude, SK 15-3 on the split. We've been screaming from the rooftops what their weaknesses are. They're 15-3. It took international teams to beat them.
Yeah.
I'm still going to say Fnatic as the favorite.
Maybe if they were on the other side of the bracket, SK Gaming, they would have a harder path, but we'll see how it plays out. Stress?
I think both teams are a little bit too solid right now. I predict it to be a final. I don't say it's a done deal, but they need one of the other teams needs to become more consistent pretty much in a week.
And I think we have to just talk a little bit about SK. We've talked about every other team in the top 6. Despite their glaring weaknesses, despite their glaringly unique style of play, they're still unstoppable.
Yeah.
You look at Forgiven, you can ask some questions about his champions, but he's still CSing. You can look at Enrated, about his champion pool, he pulls at Nami, lands bubble off the bubble. Fox plays Katarina in the LCS and wins. I
agree. But the thing, what you have to remember is when you prepare for these LCS weeks, and again, it's best out of 1, you don't necessarily sit down and you completely tailor strategy just after SK Gaming. You're going to do that now for the playoffs. So if SK Gaming will only run the same playstyle but with different champions, you should know exactly what's going to happen every single time. And that's where teams can, pick a strategy around it, practice against it in some way. And I feel like it's easier to prepare against SK than it is against Fnatic. But I'm not going to take anything away. SK Gaming has been fantastic here in Europe. They deserve to be number 1. I just think it's easier to prepare for SK than Fnatic.
It's easier to prepare and to say what you have to do, but if you're any other team than Fnatic, it's almost impossible to do that. So we will see how that plays out. The spring playoffs, they begin next Saturday, April 4th, right here in Berlin with H2K versus CW in a best of 5, followed by the Gambit versus the Unicorns of Love. That will be on Sunday, April 6th. That all starts at 5 p.m. Central European Summer Time, 8 a.m. Pacific. And a reminder that you can still get tickets for the finals in Madrid, Spain. They are on sale now, and you can head over to lolesports.com/tickets and get all the info, the schedule, and of course book your tickets and join us in Madrid. Now look